Tonight, we have the latest on the devastating Texas floods. The governor there just spoke, and while the waters are receding, the death toll keeps rising. And where are the 161 missing people? I'm Elizabeth Vargas, and America's News starts right now.
Tonight,
we understand you have many questions.
A dramatic increase in the number of people missing in Texas. Did local authorities do enough the night of the catastrophic flooding? We'll go live to Texas, where officials are facing tough questions. Then President Trump calls BS on Russia's Vladimir Putin and says he'll send more weapons to Ukraine.
We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth.
Is he finally fed up? Former Ambassador John Bolton joins us live to react. And later, a new lead in the manhunt for the father accused of killing his 3 young daughters. The fugitive may have just been spotted near a campground. What vacationers need to know.
But we begin tonight in Central Texas, where a search and rescue mission for flooding victims is now grimly transitioning to search and recovery. At this hour, at least 111 people are dead in 6 counties, and just a short while ago, Governor Greg Abbott provided a staggering update on the deadly storm. 161 people are now missing in Kerr County alone. That's up from just 18 missing this morning. The number of dead includes at least 30 kids, some of whom died from flooding at Camp Mystic, the all-girls Christian camp along the Guadalupe River. 5 young girls and a counselor are still missing from that camp. The governor vowed that recovery efforts will not stop until every single person is found.
Texas will not stop until we finish the job. We will not stop until we identify, recover every single body.
The shocking tolls from this storm are raising serious questions about how prepared Texas was for it. The National Weather Service pushed out a life-threatening flash flood warning at 1:14 a.m. Friday, followed by alerts just hours later that urgently warned people to move to higher ground. Now, phone service is spotty in remote areas like Camp Mystic, so why didn't anyone go there to warn people? At his press conference today, Governor Abbott defended state officials. He said resources were on the ground and ready to go. But he said no one expected there to be a 30-foot-high tsunami wall of water. And when asked who's to blame, the governor said he's focused on solutions, not pointing fingers.
Every football team makes mistakes. The losing teams are the ones that try to point out who's to blame. The way winners talk is not to point fingers. They talk about solutions. What Texas is all about is solutions.
The governor also said that the state legislature is going to investigate what went wrong and the lack of any emergency sirens in Kerr County. An emergency management official at the press conference with the governor said that the state was in contact with Kerr County on Wednesday, 2 days ahead of the storm. But he couldn't answer why officials did not order evacuations. Earlier today, the Kerr County Sheriff said he wasn't made aware of flooding until 4 or 5 a.m. Friday, July 4th, hours after the Weather Service had issued that 1 a.m. alert. And he was unable to answer questions about whether anyone made any effort to alert the camps filled with kids along the river's banks.
The community here is asking these questions. What happened? When did it happen? Was the emergency manager awake at the time? Did they push the button to issue an emergency alert?
Sir, it's not that easy when you just push a button, okay? There's a lot more to that. And we've told you several times.
So did it happen, sir?
I can't tell you at this time. Okay.
You can't tell me if the emergency manager of the county actually issued an emergency alert.
We have live team coverage tonight. NewsNation's Brian Enton and Xavier Walton are both in hard-hit Kerr County. We'll begin with Xavier, who was at that press conference with Governor Abbott. Xavier, officials seem to dodge questions about why no one was evacuated from those camps.
Elizabeth, you know what? Governor Greg Abbott was really towing a fine line. Here's the thing. You mentioned it right off the top. 111 people dead statewide. You mentioned that number too, the number of people missing here in Kerr County. There's still a lot of emotions here, completely raw. Some people fired up, some people extremely sad. At the end of the day, people are dead and people want answers as well. So that's the line that Governor Greg Abbott was towing, as well as lawmakers and other officials that were there. There was some back and forth on whether or not some people should have been notified sooner. Take a listen.
Wednesday and Thursday before the Friday morning. I can't answer the whys. I'm not going to answer the whys. You asked when we were in contact. We started having calls and messages on Wednesday from an area of I-35, out I-10, all the way to where it touches I-20, all the way back over to where I-20 touches I-35 again. That is a large chunk of Texas that was anywhere in the potential area of where this kind of rain could have fallen. It picked this spot right here.
All right. And I'll say this, you can tell in his voice, the tone was a little bit different. I'm not an expert, but I can say that it did sound a little bit defensive. All in all, think about this too, Elizabeth, 161 people missing. A lot of people in that news conference were shocked to hear that number. I looked to the lady next to me, I said, did he just say 161?
Right.
Because we couldn't believe it. We've heard dozens, but we hadn't heard that specific number. And that really makes sense when you think about the search and rescue efforts or recovery efforts that have been ramped up in the last couple of days.
Yeah, Xavier, there hasn't been a live rescue since Friday evening. So as we hear that 161 number, and that was, I had the same reaction you did. I was watching the news conference here at our studios. I thought for a second, did I mishear this? That was it was 18 missing this morning. We jumped to 161 missing tonight. If all those people are victims of this flood, because at this point hope is starting to wane, we're talking about a death toll that will more than double from tonight, which is it's already more people dead than Hurricane Harvey, the second deadliest hurricane to ever hit the United States.
And Elizabeth, here's the thing, people forget, it was the 4th of July, and for those around the country that don't necessarily know this, the Hill Country, Texas Hill Country, this is a very popular place to be, especially along the Guadalupe River. I mean, there are so many communities that were just washed away, and unfortunately they had no warning and they didn't have a chance. And that's why when you hear this number, it really is a harsh reality starting to settle in.
Right, and folks also from all over the country who were visiting that beautiful part of Texas, not just Texans. It's a real national tragedy. Xavier Walton, thanks so much. Joining me now is NewsNation senior correspondent Brian Enton. Brian, you're also in Kerr County. Listen, these rescuers, these folks who were searching for the victims of this flood, these missing 161 folks, this is very hot. They're exhausted. It's very difficult, traumatic, emotionally traumatic work they're doing.
It is, and they realize in many cases they're looking for children, and it's been brutal, the conditions out here. It is so hot and muggy and swampy. These are the search crews here. We're along the Guadalupe River. This is the river here, Elizabeth, and they've been searching all day long. We've just been following as they move down the river. They look in all, if you look down here, like you see this big tree stump and all that debris that goes down into the water, they will get down in there and look underneath, and they really don't leave a stone unturned, because 161 people, and the way they were explaining it to me, and some of it's difficult to talk about because we're talking about people here, but they believe that they could be trapped up underneath some of the stumps and debris. And the issue here, Elizabeth, is it's not just the Guadalupe River. The water here was above my head, and it actually flooded over here. In this area, there's a rock quarry. So let me show you what they're doing over here. There's not normally water here. This lake doesn't normally exist. This is all water from the Guadalupe River that flooded in. So what these fire crews are doing here is they're slowly trying to drain the water, because they believe it's possible that there could actually be people that came over into this body of water when the water spilled over. And you see that little part sticking out of the water. That's actually the top of a pickup truck, Elizabeth. Wow. And they were just in that truck. The water's finally going down. They were able to search, make sure that there was no one there. There was an RV in this body of water that they searched a little while ago. So it stretches beyond just the river and the river banks into areas like this. We talked to some of these first responders who are doing this hard work a little while ago. Take a look.
Water came heavy, and this whole quarry area where we're standing became like a natural dumping spot for the torrential floodwaters, carrying tons of debris and including, things that we're desperately looking for, people and trailers.
When you're searching for people, you could come across a deceased child, which is never easy for anybody. So that's why we really tried to keep our volunteer base for this mission only special ops volunteers, what we call them. They're all combat veterans.
They could be taken tens of miles downstream, even 100 miles. The power of the water, the depth of the floodwaters.
The water was raging. And no telling where we're going to find everybody. I just pray we find everybody.
And where we are, Elizabeth, we're about 20 miles downriver from Camp Mystic, but this gives you an idea of how far they think people may have been, the current may have taken them. Right now they're pulling out this tree stump. Again, they literally want to look under all of these tree stumps because they're that concerned that there could be human remains underneath. And if we come over here again, another RV I didn't get a chance to show you last time, but this is another RV that they searched right here that was taken down the river. There's not an RV park around here. That came down the river and then ended up here. So it gives you an idea of just how vast the search is and how long it may take out here. 161 people that they're looking for. Elizabeth?
Hey, Brian, how big is Kerr County? When we talk about nearly 200 people missing in this one county, how big is that county?
It's a relatively rural county. I don't have the population off the top of my head. 200,000? Okay, 300,000. So thank you so much. 300,000 people. But the thing is, which the governor touched on today, is that people come here for the 4th of July holiday to camp along the river. So many of the missing people aren't from here, which is the reason I think we didn't get this big number until today, which it's Tuesday, because people didn't go home. So, no one reported the missing until suddenly they realized their friends or family members who went camping didn't come back home to Houston or Dallas or to other parts of the state.
Right, it's not just parts of the state. I happen to know of a family from the Bay Area who was camping down there in Hunt in Kerr County and is missing now. So there are folks from not just all over Texas, but all over the country. Brian Enton down with the search and rescue crews doing really heroic, difficult work. Thank you. These stories, we just heard some of them from Brian, but the stories from the survivors of the devastation and loss are simply heartbreaking, especially for one woman who witnessed an entire family being swept away in the raging floodwaters, despite everything she and her husband did to try and save their lives. That woman is Lorena Gillian, owner of the Blue Oaks RV Park on the banks of the Guadalupe River. Lorena sprang into action after hearing the screams of people being swept away in their cars early Friday morning. She banged on the doors of every RV, waking people up, telling sleeping families, you've got to wake up, you've got to get out now. Lorena and her husband helped save nearly everybody at that RV park, but tragically, one family did not make it. Gillian says she will never forget the frantic cries as this family of 5 clung to a tree with the river rapidly rising around them. Her husband yelled out to the father in that family to throw him their baby to save the infant's life. But in an instant, that entire family was gone, swept away in the rushing floodwaters. Lorena joins me now live from Kerrville. Lorena, I can't fathom going through what you and your husband went through that night. You own that RV park. Before we get to the story of that family, tell me the story of the hours leading up to that. You say the rain actually woke you up in the middle of the night, and you went out to check the the levels of the river. What did it look like at that point, around 2 o'clock in the morning?
Everything was fine. It looked normal. I mean, wet because it was raining, but normal. There was no sight of the river rising. And I even called the sheriff's department to ask what it was looking up river to see if I needed to evacuate, but they did not have any information at that time.
What did they tell you when you called them? And this was about 2:30 in the morning.
Yes, I asked them, how's it looking? It's been a lot. Do we need to be concerned? Do we need to evacuate? And the dispatcher said, we don't have information. We don't know. That's all I got. So they did not tell you to evacuate at that time. Had you gotten the alerts on your phone earlier at around 1:15 in the morning? Yes, we did, but you have to understand, we're in the in Texas hill country. We have a lot of hills, and we get a lot of flash floods with little bitty rain for all the low water crossings. They always get flooded. That is very normal for our area.
So by the time you woke up a second time that night, it was a full-fledged emergency. There was water everywhere. What woke you up at that point?
Well, one of my residents called 911 because he could hear people screaming, and they specialize in water rescue. They're from Ingram, Texas. They rushed into the water to try to save the family, but they couldn't get to it. They tried to put both boats in the water, but it was impossible for them to get to them. By two other ones, so it was very. And my husband was in the water. He was crying, and you could see dozens of cars with the lights on floating by really fast, and RVs floating, and you can hear honking and you can hear screaming. You can see the cabins next door floating as well, smashing against the trees, and it was just chaos. The fire department had gotten here at that time, and it was just evacuate. That was the only thing we could do, and just get out. And most people got out with just their lives and barefooted, without clothes, just holding on tight to their dogs and just trying to, walk through the waters to get out. And the water came up so fast. It was just never in my life had I ever seen a flood that came in that fast.
Yeah, you were breaking up a little, so I want to make sure our audience heard everything that you said. You said you actually saw people trapped in cars and RVs floating by and screaming for help from inside?
Yes, they were honking, and you can see hands banging against the windows. It was horrific, and you can see that because of the lighting that was happening at that time, the thunder, and you can hear the honking. It was just awful, and I remember very clear with one of the cabins. I guess it was the first cabin. I'm not sure that it hit one of the big trees, and it was destroyed. By the time it hit, you can hear the screams of the people that were inside.
Lorena, you're describing something that is beyond horrific and awful and tragic. It's almost unimaginable. You say you've never, ever seen flooding like this.
No, normal floods. We had one last year, and the waters slowly come up and go down and come up and go down. But this wave of water that we have, you're looking at about 35 to 40 feet in about 45 minutes. That's a lot of water, and so fast, and it was raging water. It was so strong, the current. It was impossible. I mean, nobody could have done anything. Nobody could have predicted anything like that.
Lorena Gillian, what you have been through is unbelievable. Just very quickly, how many folks were in your RV camp that you own?
We had 28 RVs parked here, plus 5 closer to the island, closer to the water. And only that one family was the one that did not make it. And I also lost one of my employees.
All right. So one family didn't make it, but the other 20 or so did?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, largely thanks to you banging on the doors and waking them up. Lorena Gillian, thank you for telling us your story and for your work that night, saving the lives that you could. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up for us, I'll speak live to the founder of a nonprofit. He's on the ground in Texas helping those in need, and he'll tell us how you can help as well. And later, President Trump meets with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu late this afternoon for a second day. Are we any closer to a ceasefire in Gaza? Ambassador John Bolton will join me live to discuss. So when disasters strike, like the floods in Texas, these are occasions to see the worst of Mother Nature and the best in human nature. This week, volunteers are stepping up to help Texas families who lost their homes, their loved ones, everything. The Florida-based nonprofit Global Empowerment Mission, or GEM for short, is distributing supplies like food, water, and debit cards to those in need. GEM was founded in 2010 in response to the devastating earthquake in Haiti. Since then, the group has deployed to over 370 disaster zones, including the Los Angeles fires, Ukraine, and of course, now Texas. Joining me now is the founder and president of Global Empowerment Mission, Michael Capone. Michael, thanks so much. I know you're actually in a fire engine in Hunt, Texas. You're on the ground there. I'm just curious, tell me what your impressions are of what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's a very different disaster than what we're used to, right? It's a much bigger disaster than what most of America thinks, I believe, right? It's not just what happened at Camp Mystic and the trailer park, which we were just with Lorena yesterday, by the way. This is, 30, 40 mile stretch, and pretty much every single person that had a house or business along that river or anywhere up from it, it doesn't exist anymore, right? But then everything else is normal. So it's like a completely different, very surgical response for us. And, you just heard from her, right, earlier. I mean, we've heard these stories all week being here. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. It's, there's children that were found literally 2 miles later hanging on a tree. Everywhere you look, there's clothing of children on branches that are 30, 25, 35 feet high. So that just explains how high that water receded everywhere. So we have some aid trucks that, got in today from Miami. There's survivors that are just now getting back into the Hunt area, right? Because this area has been closed off. This is basically ground zero. Mm-hmm. We've been inviting through our partnership with Bethany Frankel, those Be Strong gift cards that we have. So we're giving all the basic evacuee survivors $1,000 right now each, just so they have some short-term incidental, because most of them are coming back to nothing. There is nothing to come back to. That's what everybody needs to understand. It's very similar like North Carolina.
Right. Just hearing Lorena talk about what she saw that night, it's traumatic to listen to her story. I can't imagine living her own story. Are a lot of these people that you're seeing who are returning back to see the devastation for the first time just utterly shell-shocked?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to touch this community for decades. It's like I said, there's nothing to see when you come back to. If you live close to the river, that's it. It's all washed away. There's nothing. It's just stripped. And you'll be lucky if you could find your car 2 miles down the river on top of a hill somewhere, and it looks like it went through a war zone in Ukraine because it's been pulled over 100 times throughout the river. So you can imagine what people went through while they were in that water, like being in a laundry machine almost, with that kind of pressure. So it's very, very heartbreaking, and it's going to be a very long-term response for us here.
Unlike many of the disasters to which you've responded, in this one, there are so many children who are dead, so many children who are missing. That's what makes this so sadly unique, so awfully, awfully unique in that way.
Yeah. The chief firefighter who basically allowed me to do this interview from this engine, he's also the principal of the school where many of the children that were in the camp attend. So you can imagine the people right now that are calling the survivors to come pick up our gift cards, they're the mothers of these children.
Unfathomable. All right, so you're giving out hygiene kits, you're giving out food, you're giving out water. If folks want to help contribute to their organization to help get those necessities to the survivors down there, how do they donate to your organization?
Yeah, you could go on our website, globalempowermentmission.org. We've had some incredible donors already, like David and Nicole Tepper Foundation that, donated $100,000, and we will take that money and literally convert it immediately into cash Visa cards and then give it to everybody. There's going to be thousands of people to, give money to. They're going to have to start over completely from scratch.
They've lost everything.
They've lost everything. So, as nice as it is to bring, cases of water and used clothes and everything, they're going to need a lot more than that in the next couple of months. So
how many folks have you been able to help so far?
I think today, you've got to, it's hard. People are just coming back to this area now. So I think we've probably given, 30 or so families, probably $500 or $1,000 each just today. They're just getting back. They're in shock.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. Michael Capone, thank you so much. Really appreciate you and the work you and your organization do to help folks in need. And again, to our audience, you can go to globalempowermentmission.org/donate. As Michael just said, all of your money will go to help the folks in Texas. All right, coming up, we are going to switch gears because President Trump made some news today. He is apparently shaking hands with one world leader and cursing at another. I'll ask John Bolton, his former ambassador to the United Nations, what he thinks about Trump's meeting with the Israeli prime minister and his war of words with the Russian president. Next. So how do you know President Trump is losing patience with a foreign leader? Well, like many people, his exasperation can express itself with profanity. 2 weeks ago, he famously dropped an F-bomb while Israel and Iran were on the verge of ruining the fragile ceasefire he helped negotiate. And today, the president used profanity again when asked about Russian President Vladimir Putin during a cabinet meeting. The president accused Putin of making a mockery of the peace talks with Ukraine.
Look, I'm very unhappy with them. There's no reason for this. It's turned out to be tougher. We get a lot of thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
The president has spent plenty of political capital on the Ukrainian war. Trump declared during his presidential campaign that he'd be able to end the war in Ukraine on day one. Well, more than 5 months later, the war there is still going. And after initially trying to avoid provoking Russia, the president is reversing course, now announcing just last night he was going to send more weapons to Kyiv.
We wanted to put defensive weapons because Putin is not treating human beings right. He's killing too many people. So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
Now, this is a huge turnaround for President Trump. It was just February when that infamous Oval Office smackdown with Ukrainian President Zelensky took place. That was followed by a brief pause in military aid and intelligence sharing, with the Trump administration accusing Zelensky of being an obstacle to peace. For his part, Zelensky has consistently maintained that Vladimir Putin is a dishonest negotiator who cannot be trusted. Fast forward to today, as President Trump may be coming around to Zelensky's position. Trump says he's even considering a Senate bill furthering sanctions on Moscow. All right, to help make sense of it all, we're joined by John Bolton. He's a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and a former Trump national security advisor. Ambassador, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for... You were here last night, but the big speech at the dinner table went on quite long with both President Trump and the Prime Minister Netanyahu. But let's start with Russia. Trump was very critical of Putin in that cabinet meeting this afternoon. Is Trump finally giving up on Putin?
Well, reality may be breaking in. That's good news. And I think the fact that he's now willing to overrule the Defense Department, which tried to pause the delivery of air defense assets like Patriots and Sidewinders and the like, I think this is hopefully an indication of the direction in the future. But Trump still has not made a decision, as far as I'm aware, on a sustained flow of assistance to Ukraine, weapons, ammunition, military intelligence, and other things. And that's really the next decision we need. It could be if next week he has a good phone conversation with Putin, he could change his mood. You just don't know. But this is, I think it's fair to say, 6 months in to the second term. This is the harshest he's talked about Putin during that entire period.
It's the harshest, and it's also just the latest. He's been gradually getting more and more frustrated. It's palpable, actually, in what he has said and what he has posted on social media.
Well, that's what he's saying publicly. I mean, he started the second term the way he spent 4 years in the first term. He thought he and Putin were friends, and I think he believed on that basis he could solve the Ukraine war. But that's not the way it works in international affairs. Trump called the conflict senseless. Now, if you're Ukrainian, you think you're fighting for your freedom and independence. That's not senseless to the Ukrainians. If you're Putin and the Russians who support the war, and most of them do, they think they're fighting for the Russian Empire. It's not the cause I would support, but they don't think it's senseless. So if you don't understand that the two parties to the conflict have issues at stake, then no wonder you can't solve it in 24 hours.
Right. Also today, during that cabinet meeting, the CIA director, Ratliff, was discussing reports that apparently Russia has been using chemical weapons against Ukraine. Both German and Dutch intelligence say Russia is using drones to drop poison gas on Ukrainian soldiers. Today, Director Ratliff said the president is not going to allow for any violations of the international laws banning chemical weapons. Do you think Trump will take any action on this at all?
Well, I think obviously you have to look at the information. Not all chemicals are banned by the Chemical Weapons Convention, just for starters. Trump did use force twice in Syria in 2017 and 2018 when the Assad regime did use chemical weapons against his own people. I seriously doubt he's going to do it here because that would be an attack by the United States on Russia, and they could consider that an act of war. That would be something way, way beyond anything Trump has ever done before.
Yeah. All right. Let's switch to the Middle East. President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister again for a second time today. Last night they had dinner. We carried their dinner speeches this afternoon. After his cabinet meeting, he met with the Prime Minister. Trump very much wants to announce a ceasefire in Gaza, hopefully by the end of the week. But he has to convince the Prime Minister to end his war on Hamas. Can he do that?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think Israel's going to give up until Hamas is completely dismantled politically and militarily. I think what Israel is prepared to agree to is a brief ceasefire, a return of hopefully a number of living hostages, and sadly the remains of those who have died or maybe died as far back as October the 7th, and the release of something like 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. And so that will get some of the hostages back. The Hamas high command wants an end to the war. I don't see Israel agreeing to that.
What has the 12-day war, the success that Israel under Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership has had in so dramatically weakening Iran, what has that done to the political pressure on Netanyahu? Do you think he might feel more emboldened to stand up to the right wing of his party and say, no, it's time to come to a ceasefire and do what we can to get all those hostages out? Or is he still very beholden to them? Because most of them want no deal in Gaza. They want to keep fighting.
Well, as I say, you can get a ceasefire, I think, fairly easily to get an exchange of hostages. There was one, the most recent, really right after Trump's inauguration, where he basically forced that on Netanyahu, and it lasted 60 days, and then they went back to war. The question is Israel as a country determined to achieve what they say their objectives are, which is eliminating Hamas politically and militarily? Or are they content to leave Hamas in control of some undetermined amount of tunnels under Gaza with their fighters still in place? And like cutting a cancer out, only 2/3 of it, what's the remaining third going to do? It's going to try and grow back to its original size.
Yeah, it was very interesting last night listening to the Prime Minister when he was asked specifically and directly if he would accept any kind of two-state solution. He did not say he would.
Yeah, look, he's trying not to get into a disagreement with Trump on national television, and I think he was obviously parsing his words. I thought the highlight of that event, frankly, was Netanyahu presenting Trump with his letter nominating Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. That's what he wants more than anything else.
Yes, that was the chef's kiss right there. Good move by the Prime Minister. Ambassador John Moulton, thank you so much. Great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, coming up for us, the father accused of killing his 3 young daughters may have been seen in a national forest in Idaho. But searching the dense terrain is no easy task. I'll speak live to a former U.S. Marshal about the manhunt coming up. And don't forget, you can download our NewsNation app on the latest. To get the latest news and the top stories of the night, just go to the Apple App Store. All right, there are possible new tips tonight in the manhunt for that accused child killer, Travis Decker. Authorities are now focusing on Idaho's Sawtooth National Forest. A family of campers reported seeing a man who looked like Decker last week in the Bear Creek area of the massive forest. Police also released these 3 different looks of Decker with varying hair lengths and facial hair to aid in the search for the fugitive father. Decker's been on the run now from authorities for more than a month. He is wanted in the brutal murders of his 3 daughters, all found dead in a Washington state campsite in May. The girls had been on a scheduled visit with Decker when they went missing and he disappeared. Now, this new sighting of Decker, possibly in Idaho, is more than 500 miles from where the girls' bodies were found. Authorities say it's possible that Decker, who is a skilled outdoorsman, hitchhiked to the remote area, which covers more than 2 million acres. It also re-energizes the search for the fugitive, many were wondering if he was even still alive. For more on the manhunt, we're joined by Art Roderick. He's a former U.S. Marshal, very experienced in these kinds of things. Art, what are authorities doing now when they get a tip that's 500 miles from the scene of the crime?
Well, every single tip has got to be investigated, but when I've worked cases in this particular area, and I'll tell you that every single lead will be worked out, and what you do as an investigator is you look for actionable leads. So this lead looks pretty good, but there has not been 100% confirmation of him anywhere after this particular crime was committed. So that's the key part of investigating individuals like that, is try to get as close as you can. So if we could get them a couple days behind, then we know we're in the right area here. Right. And the marshal will continue to investigate this particular case.
How do they figure out, Art, how do they figure out if this family really saw Decker or not?
Well, you know, they have a pretty good DNA sample from him, so if they can possibly find some way to get DNA, otherwise it's almost impossible to 100% confirm this individual. Now, I know that this individual is the person you're looking for. Now, I know a lot of times when you get these tips in, if you start getting a cluster of them, then you know you're onto something.
Right.
And you can confirm that it's 100% that it is him, and you start catching up on that timeline.
And there's word he might have hitchhiked. Obviously, he didn't walk 500 miles in a month. That would mean people are picking him up. Maybe we haven't gotten the word out enough that he's wanted for this triple murder.
Yeah, I think that's probably a case here. You know, I've got to tell you, I've been in local and federal law enforcement for almost 40 years. And lately, these cases, these major cases around the country are just piling up. And some are getting more press than others. Hopefully this information will get out there. And I know the marshals have an 877 wanted to number. And if you call that or you go on the U.S. Marshals .gov website and leave leads, they're looking for more leads. They need to confirm 100% that they have a visual on this individual at some point in time so they can get closer and closer to him.
Well, and clearly we're reporting on this. I'm sure authorities would want anybody who picked up a hitchhiker between those 2 spots to call in and report that they in fact did that. Finally, very quickly, he's a vet. He apparently was having some mental health issues, according to his ex-wife. How does his Army training play when it comes to surviving out there in the wilderness?
Yeah, it's big time. I've seen reports that he's a trained Army Ranger, so obviously that's going to weigh into a lot of it. I know the U.S. Marshal Special Operations Group and is responding and on the ground up there. That most of those individuals are former military, very well trained, and this terrain is very unique, very hard terrain to get around it, and also the weather is causing some issues with some of the equipment that they have up there, specifically like forward-looking infrared. When the temperatures are up in the 90s, there's a lot of things going on here. It's really going to probably come down to boots on the ground, just pounding that ground and getting him to show himself.
All right, Art Roderick from the U.S. Marshal Service, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. All right, coming up. Is the Justice Department still covering up the Jeffrey Epstein case? Chris Cuomo joins me live with a preview of that conversation in a moment. All right, there is still lots of reaction, lots of debate, lots of outrage over the Justice Department saying there's no there with the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. The Justice Department said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. Jeffrey Epstein didn't have a client list that he was blackmailing. Chris Cuomo joins me now. You're about to speak with Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark, about that DOJ and FBI report. Mark does not believe that Jeffrey committed suicide.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to talk to him. I've spoken to him before, and he wasn't really close with his brother, and I never knew how much of that was convenience because he didn't want to get painted with the same stink. But for him to hold on that he believes something happened to his brother, which is what he told me at the time, I want to know what his basis is. And look, the administration did themselves no favor here. Bondi saying, I got the list right here, I got it right here, and leading people to believe that. You know, now they reap what they sow. But look, you know how I feel about this. This is a grand distraction. It's just that it was so central to so many who are MAGA enthusiasts. And it's interesting to see, you know, what is starting to splinter the fringe on the right. And that's what tonight's about.
Well, it was also central to several people who are inside the Trump administration right now. Dan Bongino, Kash Patel.
Yeah. Yeah, but don't confuse what somebody says on a podcast with what they're going to say when they're going to be held accountable.
Exactly.
It's one thing when you're looking for clicks and following and to feed conspiracies and all these other things that make you money. It's another thing when you have to take account. Right. And that's why Kash Patel and Bongino and Bobby and all the other ones have really changed their tune.
All right, Chris, I'm looking forward to it. Have a great show.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.